Welcome to Long Story Short, a series where big historical events and themes are explained in a concise way that does not sacrifice facts or analysis. In today's episode, we are going to be exploring the last days of the Weimar Republic, leading up to its collapse. We will be assessing the timeline and factors which brought about the fall of Weimar. Important to untangle too is the complex web of political players whose incompetence or deliberate actions brought about the death of democracy in return for the sinister and autocratic regime of the Nazis. It is the early 1930s and the Weimar Republic is in the thick of the Great Depression. Over 6 million people are unemployed. 50,000 small businesses have collapsed, and a general feeling of hopelessness settled over every layer of German society. Things are not in better shape in Weimar politics either. The Chancellor, Heinrich Brüning, was in an extremely fragile position, with little support in the Reichstag. His government was essentially propped up by President Hindenburg and the vague emergency powers of Article 48. But even President Hindenburg did not entirely prove stable. He stood for presidential re-election in the spring of 1932, but in the first round, he did not receive the comfortable majority he needed. Standing against him, Hitler gained roughly 30% of the vote. Although Hindenburg eventually gained enough votes in the second round with the backing of the SPD, the presidential elections can be seen as an indication that something ominous lurked in the wings of Weimar politics, which would be unleashed with a specific sequence of events. Brüning's position did not hold. He fell from government over a disagreement concerning the estates of the Junker, Germany's class of aristocrats, being turned into provisions for the unemployed. Brüning, after pressure from the elite and from Hindenburg himself, resigned in May 1932, opening the door for the end of democracy. With Brüning gone, the position of Chancellor was left open to fill, something which was taken advantage of by one important player in the politics of Weimar's downfall. Kurt von Schleicher had a deep disdain of democracy. Being a prominent member of the army and of the Junker class, it was his plan to enact a regime change of stealth to a military-led autocracy modelled on the previous Kaiserreich. Schleicher used his influence with Hindenburg to install a chancellor of his picking, Franz von Papen, a politician and fellow member of the military Junker elite, whom Schleicher felt he could influence to do his bidding. Papen became Chancellor on the 2nd of June 1932. His cabinet became known as the Baron's Cabinet because it was dominated by his fellow aristocratic elite, something which was unpopular with Reichstag deputies, so the Reichstag was dissolved soon after it had convened. On top of this, Germany's streets fell into peril as a ban on the Nazis' paramilitary wings, the SA and SS, was lifted, which brought an onslaught of violence and intimidation. This rise of extremism was similarly reflected in the federal elections, which were held at the end of July. Support for more moderate parties fell in favour for extremist parties. The KPD, the Communist Party, made gains favoured by the working class, becoming the third largest party, but it was the Nazi Party which saw the most dramatic and worrying gains, becoming the largest party in the Reichstag with 37% of the vote, or 230 seats. As Mary Fulbrook argues, the Nazi Party saw themselves as the People's Party, transcending class boundaries and narrow interests. They were able to exploit people's fears of communism, as well as using populist messages of work and bread and scapegoating. This emboldened Hitler to demand to become Chancellor. Hindenburg rejected him, deeming Hitler to be a Bohemian corporal, capable only of vice-chancellorship at most. The Reichstag convened soon after, in the September, only to give Papen a vote of no confidence. Parliament was dissolved again, and a fresh round of elections were called in November, but it did little to extend Papen's authority. The Communists made gains now, massing 130 seats in the Reichstag. The Nazis lost 2 million votes, but still had 32%, so Hitler continued to demand the chancellorship. Papen's chancellorship was not what Schleicher had imagined. He had little authority or support, both in the Reichstag and throughout the country, so Schleicher put in motion a plan to oust Papen by getting his fellow army officers to convince Hindenburg that a civil war was imminent under Papen's chancellorship. Schleicher replaced Papen in December 1932 and attempted to secure his position by courting support from any available source, trade unions to rebel Nazis such as Gregor Strasser, but this would all prove in vain, since forces plotted against Schleicher, intent on seeing his downfall. Seeing an opportunity to cling to power, Papen set about devising his own scheme. He met with Hitler in January 1933 to discuss an alliance against their mutual enemy, because at this point, Hitler had become the undisputed leader of the Nazi Party. Papen was under the impression that the Nazis could be used as the largest party in the Reichstag and could be controlled into doing his bidding. So Hitler and Papen devised a backroom deal to form a coalition government with Hitler as Chancellor and Papen as Vice-Chancellor. Papen was to gain the support of the Junkers and to use his influence with Hindenburg to convince him to unseat Schleicher. With the help of Hindenburg's son, Oskar von Hindenburg, Schleicher was dismissed from his position at the end of January 1933, when his cabinet fell apart. On the 30th of January 1933, Hitler became the Chancellor of Germany, which fulfilled his aims of hijacking and fracturing the Republic through legal means. Many left-wing groups such as the SPD marched in protest on the streets to try to stop Hitler from becoming Chancellor, but there was no use. Weimar democracy was as good as dead, destroyed from within not just by the Nazis, but by the machinations of the conservative Junker elite. As Chancellor, Hitler now could do the very thing he aimed to, make Germany into a fascist police state and dictatorship. Hi there, thank you so much for watching this video. If you enjoyed, please consider liking and subscribing. I also have an Instagram and a TikTok page which I have linked below. Again, thank you so much for watching. I have been Our Historia, and until next time.